an associated Q&A, we will move on to general business. So for the Zoomers out there, I hope you can hear me. First of all, a reminder to please mute your microphones if not already done so. We can't hear any background noise from your place. During the presentation, I ask you all to keep your microphones muted. For the Q&A session, you can ask questions by virtually raising your hand, or there are a number of ways of doing it. I'm sure you've all experienced that before. For those here in the audience, it is just a matter of raising your hand, but I will ask you to either come up here or Brendan will try and repeat the question after you've spoken it and announce it to the audience. So without further ado, introducing the speaker, Brendan Alting. Brendan's a final year PhD student at the University of New South Wales and an off research grant recipient. One of 3 or 4 of our research grants recipients that we asked to come along and give a presentation about their project. And this is where your donation dollars go largely to funding across the board a number of researchers at the various universities. Brendan will be presenting results from his PhD project into interactions between dingoes, an apex predator, and 3 mesopredators, quolls, foxes, and goannas. Apex predators such as dingoes can exert strong influences on smaller predators, suppressing their numbers, benefiting smaller species in different ways. So Brendan's work is part of the Mile Lakes Dingo Project, which has been ongoing on the mid-north coast of New South Wales since 2019. The project aims to improve dingo management through collaboration with local residents, national parks, Indigenous groups, and council. Sounds like a wonderful project and very, very interesting. So with that brief introduction, Brendan, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Brendan. So first is that mic okay? Okay. So first I'm gonna go through a bit of the project that we're running up there, just to give you guys a bit of a background about the kind of work that we do, and then I'll go more into the project as I go on. So yeah, as was said, this is the project that I'm going to be talking about a bit later. So how dingoes affect these 3 mesopredators. So mesopredator is a smaller predator. Apex predator in this case is the dingo. Yeah, and how their behaviors of these smaller predators change depending on where dingoes are and how often they're in an area. Yeah, so I'll start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which this work was conducted, the Worimi people, and also the Bidjigal people whose land I'm speaking on today. So yeah, this is just the acknowledgements, get that out of the way first. On the top right is my supervisors, Ben and Neil. Ben Pitcher from Macquarie University and Neil Jordan from UNSW, which is where I'm doing my PhD. We okay? Sorry.
I'll get recording otherwise. A little bit. Flip around the Zoom and share. You know me. Oh, that's not what the one is that.
Yeah, just go a few more. Yeah, that's this one.
Yeah, he's right. Does that enable me to share over here, Kim? Well, man. Where's the mouse gone? No, it's disappeared on me. Yeah. Really sick. It's not on. Oh, just. Oh. Which one are you on? Is it?
Yeah, maybe this one. Yeah. Just pretend you didn't see it.
Okay, that's it. Yep. Sorry about that. I know.
Is that me doing something? Okay. I think we're good. All right, I'll start again. Yeah, yeah, like over and a little bit. So these are I'm just going to do the acknowledgements quickly. So yeah, I mentioned my supervisors, and these are all the funders who've helped the project over the last 5 years. And then also one missing, Outlive Flora and Fauna, who helped fund this project that I'm doing. So thank you very much for that. And then all the photos were from Bobby Joe, Harrison Vincent, Chantel, and Brent Mail as well. And then these are some of the partners we work with as well. So UNSW, that's where I'm from, New South Wales National Parks, Tide Indigenous Development Group. We work with their rangers, and then the Taronga and Mid Coast Council as well. So yeah, Milex is a really good study location to study dingoes, as dingoes are really visible in the area. They're very adapted to humans, so they're easy to see, and there's a very stable population. So they have very distinct territories. We can see who they are. Often in other environments, dingoes can be very elusive, afraid of people, but here they're quite, quite easy to see, and often at the beach, at the campgrounds and stuff. So yeah, the overall aims of the project are to improve. What's going on here? Is that me? Improve understanding of dingo behavior for management, develop and test non-lethal management tools. So rather than killing dingoes when they become a problem for whatever reason, we can hopefully be more proactive, and develop and implement frameworks for coexistence with dingoes. And like I said, these are all the different groups we work with. So there's a lot of politics, mainly we're managing people effectively. We're talking to all the stakeholder groups, all the people that are impacted by dingoes in different ways, and working together to find proper solutions. So a bit of a background on dingoes. So they're socially monogamous, which means that they have one breeding pair in a pack. And that means they have some young from previous years and then pups from that year as well. So this is Onyx here, as his black face. And yeah, they're very territorial, so they hold distinct territories between packs, so you can't tell. You can tell exactly where each group is from, depending on where you see them, because they'll always be there. Each pack maintains that space. They're generalists and they eat pretty much anything they can eat. So in my lakes, a lot of this is fish. But a lot of fish wash up on the beach. Fishermen throw their fish frames away, things like that. But they also eat a lot of garbage, campgrounds. There's a lot of food for them in towns and things like that. They were introduced to Australia about 5,000 years ago by Indigenous people. And yeah, they're a very controversial species. So they are often a pest for farmers. They eat sheep, incompatible with sheep effectively in most areas, which means in a lot of areas they're culled to be to protect the livestock industry effectively. And a lot of the time this culling is like not effective at worst, well, maybe not effective at best and a bit inhumane at worst, and often doesn't have the desired impacts that farmers want. It's a very reactive way of dealing with the problem rather than a proactive way. But dingoes are also very culturally important and they have a big ecological role in the ecosystem. So in a lot of areas, we want to keep them around, even if livestock producers don't in some areas. So yeah, you would guess we work in Myall Lakes region. This is it. It's a super beautiful place. Lots of amazing campgrounds. So you can see on this map up here. Has anyone been to Myall Lakes before? Yeah. So you know Hawk's Nest is in the south down here. Tea Gardens is across the bridge just here. And then there's campgrounds along the way. Sorry, people on Zoom, you're gonna have to imagine what I'm pointing at right now. And then the national park boundary stretches all the way up to here. UNSW has a field station up here, which is very convenient. And then the town of Seal Rocks, which is basically only busy during the summer period. It's used for a lot of different things, so recreational uses, four-wheel driving, fishing. Yeah, a lot of people camp there, like I said, and a lot of cycling as well. So yeah, I'll talk about a couple of the dingo management issues that we have. So there's conflict with humans is probably the biggest one, and that comes from people feeding the dingoes primarily. So they can either thieve food from bins or people directly feed them, as you can see in this photo. We think that was a meat pie outside the bakery. But yeah, when they become bolder, they tend to get closer to humans, and that's when issues can start to arise. I'm sure you've all heard about dingoes on Gari or Fraser Island, where they're often a problem. Um, and it's a similar situation here. So when people continue to feed them or steal food from campgrounds, they get more bold. So that can result in this, people in the local area becoming afraid. So this dingo danger in Jimmy's Beach was the article. And people get cautious, people want the problem dealt with. The dingoes are getting more aggressive. And that ends up with this happening. So Mid Coast Council culled in early 2021 5 dingoes when they got too many complaints from the public. And they said officially it was 5. We think it may have been more like 10 to 12 dingoes in the local town and the surrounding areas. And this is super problematic for a few reasons. It effectively just pushes the issue down the road. So it's not dealing with the problem. The dingoes will come back. They keep coming back all the time. And the root cause is that people feed them, basically. And they feed them in their gardens or they can get to bins easily. So this problem will keep coming back. It also disrupts the pack structure, which means that the way dingoes interact with their environment is different. So they don't stay in one place. They don't have those territories, like I mentioned. That's all completely broken down, and we don't really know how that affects the ecosystem. And then there's also a lot of community anger and resentment towards things like that. So the council got a lot of kickback when that happened, because they didn't consult people. And a lot of people love the dingoes in Milex. They love them in Hawk's Nest and they feel like they're a part of the town. There's a lot of murals of them. So these kind of things are not good ways of dealing with conflict, mass culling of a big group. So what we do is council have put up a lot of signs which don't always work. But yeah, so we put up a lot of signs. There's community education, a lot of things saying, please don't feed the dingoes. But when tourists come in, they don't read these signs. Same on Gari, they don't care. No matter how many times you tell them, people think it's a cute dog and feed them. So what we do is, so this is an old figure that was supposed to have the background on it, but you might have to imagine my legs around there. So this is GPS collar data from different packs of dingoes in the area. So at the north bit here, that's Seal Rocks, and the south bit here, that's Hawk's Nest, the red pack there. So these are 6 different collared dingoes. So you can see just how completely divided those territories are. They never touch each other. And there's about 5 between Seal Rocks and Hawk's Nest, and then this is another one that she actually dispersed. That's Kathy. She actually dispersed from here, Stuart and Lloyd's campground, and went all up here, and then 40 kilometers away, started a new pack and a new territory up here at a different campground. She found her natural habitat. Yeah, she just sat at a campground, Stuart and Lloyd's campground, her whole life. She was born there, and then somehow just managed to find a totally similar campground to that one. But yeah, so this knowing all the individuals in the populations from our camera trap surveys allows us to know which dingoes are the issue. So people report issues, they take photos, we say that's that dingo. We know where it's from, we know what pack it's in, we know the areas that it hangs out. And from this collar data, well, from this collar data, we can see, yeah, the areas where they hang out mostly. So that means if we do need to control an individual, which means shooting it effectively, we know which ones to control. So this happened in Seal Rocks 2 years ago. There was a dingo up here that was chasing kids up roads at campgrounds, causing a lot of issues. It bit a kid. And so they came to us and said, oh, which one is this? And it was Tekka, a 1-year-old male. So we helped them to identify him and pick the one that needed to go. And as a result of that, he wasn't the leader of the pack. He was just a young male. He would have been dispersing soon. So that was actually his collar data here. So we helped parks and then they did control that dingo, and now that area has settled down. The pack's still there. It's still stable in that environment. So that's a much better solution rather than them panicking, coming in, shooting every dingo that they see because they don't know which one it is effectively. So we also have some issues of predation. So on wild animals, like this, yeah, what's that called? Pied oyster catcher. I wrote this all today. I know that's a pied oyster catcher. And non-wild species chicken. I know that one. Yeah, so there's pied oyster catchers on an island called Corrie Island, which is to the south near Hawk's Nest. And the dingoes have been going across there and eating the eggs there. So we have some issues with national parks of some areas wanting to control those dingoes that go on that island to protect the shorebirds, which we don't think is a particularly good idea, but they want to do it. When they see a shorebird egg gets eaten, they want to shoot that dingo, which doesn't really make sense because the egg's already gone. So you're not actually solving the problem, you're just retribution effectively. But we're trying to do things like exclusion fencing, and we're doing an ultrasonic deterrent test to, if a dingo comes into the area, an ultrasonic sound goes off and scares them away. So we're currently trialing that at the moment. Yeah, so I'll talk a bit about me. So I'm in the fourth year of my PhD. Yeah, dingo ecology and behavior, like I said. I started off very confused in my PhD. That's one of the first camera trap photos I had, and then ending a little bit manic towards the end. But yeah, I do mostly population modeling of dingoes. And I study scent marking in dingoes as well. So how they mark their territories and how dingoes move around their territories and advertise that they are territories and why they scent mark, things like that. And then also the thing I'm going to be talking to you guys about today, their relationships with quolls and foxes and goannas. Oh. Yeah, okay. So yeah, carnivores scent mark to advertise their territories. And they're also advertising to their partner that they're sexually available to reproduce. So they reproduce once per year. So they start to scent mark a lot, kind of around now, really. And then they breed in the next couple months and then den during the middle of the year. So this has been studied a lot in wolves and coyotes, but never in dingoes. So hope this will work. Okay, that video is maybe not going to work, but it's a good video. That's just showing dingo scent markings. So that's the dominant female, dominant male, and the juvenile. And this is a tree that they scent mark at. So we have a dingo detection dog that knows the trees that they mark at, and it can sniff them out. So we set up camera traps set to video, and they mark on those trees. And then, yeah, we watch those behaviors. So that's one chapter of my PhD. I'm also doing population monitoring of the dingoes. So these purple dots here are camera trap stations. So we put camera traps on trees and they take photos of the dingoes as they walk past. And we wanted to look at basically how many there are in the area. So that hasn't been done a lot in Australia, considering how much of a problem they are. And it's a relatively new method of doing it. So that was one of the main things I'm doing, and also ties into the experiment I did with the quolls as well. So the dingoes are basically geographically locked in here. So this is kind of a peninsula all the way down here. They do cross this river occasionally, but not very often. And there's a human bridge down here from Hawk's Nest to Tea Gardens, but they also don't cross that very often. So it's a really good place to study them because they're effectively closed in here. So there's not individual movement in and out often. So yeah, these are some of the dingoes we have. So this is UOM 1707 and UOF 209. This is a bit of a complicated diagram, but this was UOM 1707 in 2021. And this is him again in 2023. So all the dingoes have unique sock patterns. So all the lengths of the socks and the patterns are totally different. So you can see with that one there, it's got this weird little line in the middle. It goes quite high up the leg. Whereas on this one, UOF 209, the white sock is only halfway up the leg or a little bit closer. They're not all as clear cut as this. So yeah, you can see on this male, these two photos are like 2 years apart, but you can still see that dotted circle there and that dotted circle there. You see that little white ridge that comes up. So we spend a lot of time looking at these photos and trying to work out who's who. It can be a bit maddening at times, but I did it with my supervisor, Neil. He did them and I did them, and then we had arguments about who was who, but usually as they're territorial, you can kind of tell the environments that they're in from where the cameras are placed. So yeah, I did that over 2 years. Yeah, we had a lot of dingo detections. We detected about 21 on average in each of the 60-day surveys that we did. And the average density estimate across the whole time was 0.075 roughly. So yeah, 0.074. So that's in the Great Lakes, my lakes. Then Forsyth in Namadgi National Park estimated them at 0.06, which is a similar guess. And then Robley in 2018 in East Gippsland, 0.026. So that's about a third of what we got in my lakes. And then this study in Cape York in Queensland, 0.147. So that's twice as many as we got, and almost 7 times as many as Robley. So I'm not sure what was happening there, but yeah, they've got a lot more dingoes or something happened in the survey. But yeah, basically in New South Wales, it's the highest density population that's been done so far, but I'm sure there are more and it hasn't been done often enough to say. Yeah, so I'll talk about what I'm supposed to be talking about today. So yeah, spatial and temporal avoidance, but by mesopredators varies with the distance to dingo core territory. So I showed you those dingo territories earlier with the GPS locations. So we use that as a proxy of dingo risk in the environment. So the further you are to the dingo territory, the more potentially safe you are from that predator, effectively, is the idea. So we use the collar data for that to inform the areas of highest risk in our study area. So apex predators can influence other species, and this is very well documented. So there's this diagram here. So apex predators they compete with smaller mesopredators by competing for resources. So they're bigger. So a classic thing is in Africa, for example, African wild dogs are a small predator. They hunt an animal, and then lions come in and take their kill because they're bigger and they can scare off the wild dogs. So that's a classic example of a bigger predator, pushing down the numbers of a smaller predator through interfering with their resources. And they also directly kill the smaller mesopredators as well, potentially because they're competing for food. So dingoes and foxes, for example, compete for a lot of the same food. They're generalists. They're both canid species. So this is a phenomenon that's been documented globally, often in America with wolves. So wolves in Yellowstone were reintroduced. They ate more of the elk, and browsing was reduced on smaller trees that the elk were eating, and more trees grew, is the idea. So these top predators can have big impacts on ecosystems and smaller mesopredators. And sometimes smaller predators can benefit from the presence of the wolf. So for example, Oh, maybe I even talk about it here. Yeah. So yeah, I'll talk about wolves. So there's a lot of the relationship is to do with fear. So the coyote doesn't want to be eaten by wolf or attacked by wolf. It doesn't want to have a negative interaction. So in this study, they found that coyotes avoided areas where wolves were, and coyotes also prey on foxes. So over there, foxes then stayed closer to the wolves because the coyotes were not close to the wolves. And then foxes eat mice. And in the areas where there are a lot of wolves, the foxes ate way more mice. So there are a lot less mice in areas with a lot of wolves than without them. So they have very big impacts on the whole ecosystem. It's very complicated, can get messy, but yeah, it's a trophic cascade is what it's called. So for dingoes, this has been studied a lot. So we have the dingo fence here in Australia that goes from South Australia up to Queensland, longest fence in the world. So yeah, as I was speaking about, kangaroos, foxes, and goats, all very much more abundant inside the fence. So on our side of New South Wales, where dingoes are being almost completely exterminated inland, not on the coastal regions. And they have big ecosystem effects on the herbivory of plants from those kangaroos and goats. Um, and foxes eat smaller prey more when there's not dingoes around. So this is the dingo fence. So you can see inside the dingo fence, there's a much higher shrub abundance, and outside the dingo fence, there's a lower shrub abundance. So these shrubs can grow more in the presence of grazers because the grazers eat all the grass. So kangaroos eat all the grass seedlings out, and clip are really low, so they don't grow nearly as well. But so there's a lot more shrubs on this side which kangaroos don't eat compared to on this side. And you can see very clearly that there's differences here. It's debated to what extent that's dingoes, but dingoes are definitely a part of it. So yeah, the aims of our study was to assess the impacts of dingoes on the behavior and population abundance of three mesopredators that we have in the environment. So spotted-tailed quolls, the red fox, as I said, and lace monitor or goanna. So just a bit of background on these species. So foxes have been shown to have a negative impact on quolls. So in this paper from Glenn and Dickman, competition from other carnivores may threaten the persistence of the spotted-tailed quoll, with the impact of foxes likely to be of particular concern. And then in this paper by Tim Henderson, quolls, in this study, they only had 3 fox detections from many camera trap nights, and they had a good density estimate of quolls in their study area. So their implication was that the quolls were doing well where the foxes weren't. So foxes and quolls compete. Foxes are a little bit bigger, and might be dominant over the quolls. And a lot of people say that for quolls to persist in the environment, and they're an endangered species in New South Wales, we effectively need to poison bait foxes for them to be able to persist. And when you poison bait foxes, you're also poison baiting dingoes. So that's what's pushed by national parks across the vast majority of national parks estate. Not where we are, but yeah, that's a lot of the views. We've got to keep the foxes down to protect smaller animals. Foxes also have been shown to have a negative impact on goannas. So in areas that were baited for foxes, I'm not sure if there were dingoes here, but in areas that were baited for foxes, there were a lot more lace monitors than in areas that weren't baited for foxes. So this is probably due to competition. So yeah, this is what we tried to think about. So this dingo up here, he's going to have an impact on this fox. We know that that's negative. We know that they suppress the populations of foxes as they're generalists. We don't know how dingoes affect these species directly, quolls and goannas. But potentially, if they reduce the abundance and change the behavior of foxes, they might also help these smaller mesopredators that are negatively impacted by foxes. So what we did, we put up 39 baited cameras with chicken necks inside that we replaced every 2 weeks. And they were not very nice after 2 weeks, those chicken necks. And we had the 22 camera stations for the dingo population survey, like I spoke about before. So quolls and goannas are really good scavengers. They turn up at these chicken traps. That's the best way to catch them on camera traps. You can see the camera kind of camouflaged in here on a little stake, and then a log here, so the quoll runs up and down on, so you can see both sides. And this was done in summer 2022-23. So yeah, we had to use, I won't go too much into this, but we had to use slightly different modeling approaches for the quolls and goannas and foxes. Quolls are individually identifiable from their spots. So we could use capture, recapture, knowing where the individuals are in the landscape, and can kind of, yeah, count how many there are effectively. Goannas, potentially identifiable by their markings. I think you can, but there were way too many images of goannas and I couldn't be bothered effectively. It was too big a job, and I don't think they would have moved very much between cameras. So it would have been thousands of individuals potentially. And foxes are completely non-identifiable. So you have to use different modeling approaches for them. So yeah, we used distance to urban area as a potential variable that might affect fox abundance and quoll abundance and goanna abundance. So Hawk's Nest down here, the town of Smiths Lake up here. So this is just increasing distance here, and that's closer to the town, and furthest away from the town. So this bit in the middle here is the furthest away from any, yeah, urban area. And then from this GPS data we have, so we have 6 territories here. So we measured the distance to the middle of these territories effectively. So the green bits is closer to a dingo territory, and the yellow is further away from a dingo territory. So again, it's a similar part of the area, but this area is close to a dingo territory. There's a good dingo presence around there. Yeah, so they're similar, as you can say, but there's this big dingo pack in the middle, and dingoes stretch a bit more up here as well. So yeah, we had over 1 million images to go through. Yeah, it was a lot of images. Got a lot of cute photos. So these are some dingo pups trying to get the chicken necks. This one came and knocked over the camera just after that image. That was the very last image we got from that camera. Yeah, we also got a lot of goannas on cameras, so small ones, some big ones. And yeah, some very frustrated quolls trying to get at that chicken tube in there. You can't really see that goanna, it's very camouflaged, but he's opening his mouth crankily. We also redetected this individual quoll. So a couple of years ago, my friend saw this quoll at Mungo Brush Campground. And he took a photo of it, and we published a small note about it because it's got a very weird coloration thing here. And then we recaptured this quoll on camera 2 years later. So that was really cool. He's a male. That we now know he's a male. It's a big, big male. And he's still alive and seemingly doing okay, which is good. Yeah, he looks a lot younger in that one, so we think he must have been a juvenile then. So yeah, next time we had big pegs, maybe this big in the ground, but they didn't always work, and a lot of the the quolls managed to get them out of the ground, goannas as well. The dingoes surprisingly weren't particularly good at getting them out of the ground, but a couple of times they did. The goannas were the best though, just sheer persistence, just scraping at it the whole time. So yeah, we had 1 million images overall, so there was a lot of images to go through. So we used AI, or artificial intelligence, to collect some of these images into smaller data sets. So this program that we used divided them into animal, human, vehicle, or empty. So you can see it has this little box here, and it says, yep, I'm 98% sure that's an animal. So we take those animal images and then we go through those manually. So this one, 98% sure. On mammals, it's really good. On reptiles, a bit less good, but it's getting there. Yeah, and when it gets something like this, the back of a bike wheel, a person on it, it gets very confused. 20% animal, 12% vehicle, 76% animal. Yeah, so I had to go through those ones as well. Here's an example of it doing a bit better. So you can't really see, but these are all quails, little quails that have got every single one in this photo. And then here's a photo of it doing not very well. That's a leaf. Animal 93%. So this is my mom who came out and did field work with me one trip. This says animal 98%. She was very, very unimpressed with. But the next one it got her as a person. So yeah, it's getting there, but it does reduce the time a lot. So yeah, some of the broader results. So we identified 50 quolls over the 3 months, which was a lot more than we were expecting. Quolls and goannas were detected a lot more on baited cameras than they were in trail cameras, like we thought. And foxes and dingoes, the reverse. So they use trails a lot. So an interesting thing is that quolls, dingoes, and goannas. I could have made this a bit bigger looking at it now. Quolls, dingoes, and goannas. So we divided the cameras into ones that were in the core territory of dingoes and ones that weren't in the core territory. So just the area where they spend most of their time, and then the other areas in the landscape effectively. So dingoes were detected in the core about 22% of the time, roughly on average with what you would expect. 76% of the time outside of that. So or 78%, sorry. And then quolls a similar amount, so 29% and 26% of the cameras were in the core, so that's about in line. Foxes, we only detected them on cameras in the core dingo territory range 12 times. So that was only 5% of the total fox detections, and 95% of the detections were outside the dingo core territory range. And goannas, again, similar. They were effectively in line with what you would expect. So that's some small evidence that foxes are potentially avoiding these dingo core areas. Yeah, so we did the quoll population modeling using the capture recapture methods that I spoke about. Distance to the urban environment had the biggest influence on quoll density. So they don't like urban environments, human presence, which is as we expected. We didn't expect quolls to like being in urban environments, and they're not. We never detected them within 3 kilometers of the town of Hawk's Nest in the south. And as you go further away from the town, the density increased. And this on the right is just how much they were detected on baited cameras versus trail cameras. We also had a density estimate of 0.38 quolls per kilometer squared, which is basically exactly the same as a study done in the Hunter near the Little Coal Mine, which was 0.39 quolls per kilometer squared. So interestingly, in that study, they mentioned the low number of foxes and the fact that they heavily baited the area for foxes as a reason why the quolls were potentially in good numbers there. So it's very interesting that we have the exact same density of quolls and 0 baiting in this environment. Yeah, but naturally we have slightly lower fox numbers here without having to bait them. Bait the foxes, I mean. So fox and goanna occupancy. So goannas basically were just everywhere across the study area. They didn't change no matter what. They were slightly more further away from urban areas, but it wasn't a significant effect. Foxes, also the amount that there were, or like whether they were likely to be detected at a site, whether they were likely to be present at a site wasn't influenced by distance to urban environment or distance to dingo core territory. But distance to urban environment and distance to core territory both had a positive impact on their detectability. So that's how likely you are to detect them if they are at that camera station. It's a bit of a confusing concept that took a long time for me to get my head around, but it's effectively how often they're detected at a given site. So they were much more easily detectable when they were in an area, when they were further from urban areas and further from dingo core territories, and less detectable, yeah, the closer they were to those two things. And for the urban areas, this is a really weird result because foxes love urban areas. They attain their highest densities in urban areas. And again, with foxes, we never detected a single fox in Hawk's Nest. And there's dingoes all over Hawk's Nest. And yeah, the closest camera to Hawk's Nest that we got a fox on was 2 kilometers away as well. So yeah, it's none of this is to say that dingoes are causing this, but it's circumstantial evidence. And you would expect them to be in urban areas. They're in urban areas across the entire world effectively, and they're probably the most famous predator in urban areas, and they love it. So the fact that they're not there is kind of bizarre, and something else is going on, which we think is probably the presence of dingoes. So these black dots are dingo detections on cameras per night. So 0.7 is the highest and 0.1 is the lowest. So dingoes are in the highest density around here, and you can see there's more dingo detections here. This is Mungo Brush Campground. They're often on this camera. And then there's a few more in here. In this area here is in the middle is where there's the lowest dingo detections. They have much bigger territories around there. They take a longer time to go around. And this is also where our model predicted the highest fox detectability to be. So foxes were most detectable in this area. And this is also the area where dingoes are least present on the cameras. And finally, this is some of the temporal overlap stuff. So this figure's a little hard to see, but this gold line is, I'll talk about this top panel first. So this is in core dingo territory, and then this is in the peripheral dingo territory. So anywhere that's not the core, effectively. So the gold line is foxes. It's centered on midnight here. So this is just every time that they were detected at a camera summed up effectively. So foxes, completely nocturnal. They peak at midnight, go down until midday. They're just completely nocturnal. You almost never see them in the day. Quolls in the core dingo territory were very similar. So they had almost exactly the same pattern as the foxes, very nocturnal. Goannas is this line, this light blue line here that's hard to see, completely diurnal, completely the opposite, only active during the daytime. And this dingo line here is the pink one. So they kind of fluctuate. They're present during the day, they're present during the night. They're crepuscular, so they're mostly active at dawn and dusk, more active, but not significantly. They can be around whenever. But the interesting thing is when you come down here into the outside the core dingo territory. So foxes show basically exactly the same pattern. They're completely nocturnal. Dingoes, the pink line shows a very similar pattern. Again, some slight differences, but a bit more flat, but pretty much the same. Goannas just love the daytime no matter where they are. But quolls, this black line here, they match a lot more closely in the outside the dingo core territory. They match a lot with dingoes, and they're very much not nocturnal anymore. So in these outside the core territories, they're effectively crepuscular, so similar to the dingoes. It's difficult to say why this is. The one main thing could be that the core dingo territories are on campgrounds. So campgrounds have a lot of people, and quolls don't like people. So they may be being more nocturnal because people are active during the day. So in environments without people, they can afford to be around in the day a little more. But in environments, with people, they just stay at night. They don't want to come out during the daytime to be at risk from people, effectively. Another potential reason is that quolls may be shifting their activity to avoid foxes. So in this core dingo territory, like I said, we only detected foxes 12 times. So they're effectively not there in this environment. They're basically not present, or it's very rare for a quoll to encounter a fox. So they may prefer to be nocturnal in general. Without foxes around, they may prefer to be nocturnal. So here they're just doing what they want. They're being nocturnal, slightly avoiding the dingoes, avoiding people. But when there comes into a high fox density environment, so like down here, there's 232 detections here. The foxes are also still nocturnal. So the quolls say, okay, I'm going to have to be a bit more crepuscular. So peak here, and then drop during the middle of the night when foxes are most active, less chance of detecting a fox, and then peak again after the fox drops. But again, this is all circumstantial and it's difficult to disentangle the effects of people, the effects of dingoes, the effects of foxes. But it's interesting that quolls are so different in their time usage in the different areas. Yeah, so this is just showing overlap. So quolls and dingoes shared more overlap in the outside the core territory than they did inside. So quolls shared more overlap with dingoes when they were outside the dingo territories, where they're less likely to encounter a dingo, and vice versa with quolls and foxes. So they shared a very similar activity pattern, like I said, in the core dingo area. Yeah, so basically we can conclude that there's evidence of a sustainable quoll population in a coastal environment. This isn't typically defined as a good quoll habitat. So it's really positive that there is a good population here. And it's very similar to other intact habitats that are supposedly better for quolls. And especially as the fact that we don't need lethal control of foxes and dingoes to accomplish this is a really good sign. We had very low detections of foxes in dingo core zones, so that's also a sign that foxes are avoiding dingoes effectively, or at least are in lower numbers. And we've also seen dingoes kill a fox in these core areas, so it is an area of higher risk for foxes in those areas. And yeah, fox detectability is higher as they move away from urban areas, which was opposite as we expected, and also was higher as we move away from dingo core territory. So they're easier to see when they're away from dingo core territory. And goannas, yeah, kind of just everywhere, all around. But yeah, thanks very much. Sorry.
Do we have the lights on? Okay. Thanks, Becky. Questions? Happy to take questions. Deb, you have the first go.
I can just repeat the question if you want, if that's easier.
It's a short one.
Yeah. That the principle of dingo is benefiting quolls and sufficiently that you should be speaking with national parks on the fox benefit / dingo management wildlife programs.
Yeah. So the question was if I would be confident saying that dingoes are affecting quolls, benefiting quolls enough to, recommend parks do something different. In where we study, parks are very pro dingo. So there's no sheep farming in our study area. There is the further west you go, and they do control dingoes in those Western National Parks estates. And they will be happy to know that quolls are doing well there. And the people who run our bit of national parks are very pro dingo. They don't want to bait there, and only do so when they have to. So it's very. I don't think the other branches of parks who are much more influenced by livestock producers will care potentially. Like we'll put it out there and we'll try to publicize it, but yeah, they're very. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's enough of an effect yet to be able to convince them to, stop the baiting as much because it's a big risk, right? If you do allow them to stay and then it turns out they don't have as much of an impact as you thought, then and the quolls disappear for whatever reason. Yeah, it's hard. They take a conservative approach, I guess, which is chuck heaps of poison baits out.
Yeah, I work in national parks and I think it's cold.
Yeah.
You have to speak up a bit, careful.
Politics of it drives the baiting of dingo / quoll.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important you to talk about it finally because throwing 1080 bait out of aircraft all over the landscape, I don't think is a very political, appropriate way to manage our wildlife.
Yeah, yeah,
So
I agree.
very important.
Yeah, once they get published, yeah.
Thanks for your comments, Deb. There was one at the back. Yep.
No cats, 0 cats. We've never got a single cat on camera. Yeah, two pet cats with a collar, in Hawk's Nest, and never a single other cat. We don't really know why. Could be a habitat, could be dingoes, could be, yeah. I don't really know. It's weird that there's not one. Like, I think there's a lot of heath, which they really don't like. And it's quite a weird peninsula, so maybe it's hard for them to get in. But yeah, it's hard to know exactly why there's no cats. But I would say it's potentially also due to the impacts of the dingoes as well. Yeah, so there's sorry, the question was, we're talking about cats. The question was, yeah, are there similar studies looking at the effect of cats? There actually was one just a month ago, I think. And they showed that where there were dingoes, there were less foxes, so same as been seen everywhere. But where there were dingoes, there were more cats. And where there were foxes, there were less cats. So foxes compete with cats a lot, and there's been a few things that have come up lately that have supported that. So cats do a lot better in fox baited environments, which is potentially another reason why we shouldn't be baiting. And just because when you bait, you think about foxes, so you don't think about cats because cats don't take baits. So when there's less foxes, there's more cats, whether that's for competition for food or the foxes are directly killing the cats. So yeah, it seemed like on a broad scale, cats kind of like the dingoes because they keep fox numbers down. And the dingoes may not be suppressing cat numbers as much as they do foxes. Yeah. But yeah, it's a balance. And it's interesting that there's no cats where we are as well. I'm sure dingoes have some impact on cats, but maybe when dingoes are in really low density, the foxes have the biggest impact. Yeah.
So I just want to say that I've seen dingo taking a back.
Oh yeah. Nice. Yeah, yeah. I'm sure. So yeah, the question was about that there've been cats before in Hawk's Nest. And yeah, I'm sure there are some around, but our cameras would have got one if there was one. We had like 60 cameras across the area. So could have been maybe a stray, like from coming from someone's house that they let out without a collar or something like that.
Hounds would keep their animal because they'd be greater than two.
Yeah. The question was if people are keeping their cats indoors more. Potentially they would be, yeah. I'm not sure if they are. I haven't seen many cats ever roaming the streets around Hawk's Nest. I'm sure some people still let them out because people can be stupid sometimes, but yeah, like people walk their domestic dogs in town, like, which is fair enough. They want to walk their dogs, but they'll let them off lead on the beach near where the dingoes hang out. So people do a lot of, yeah, I don't know, not very sensible things sometimes.
Great.
Sort of food would a quoll eat compared to what a dingo would eat? Are they similar things or would it be different size categories or?
I think so. The question was, what's the diet of quolls compared to dingoes? So if they have similar overlap, I think they would go for broadly quite similar things. I think in other places, quolls have been shown to take more arboreal mammal species, so gliders and possums and stuff like that, that dingoes can't really get. But I think quolls are quite opportunistic and they'll eat whatever. Like they're very keen on chicken necks, which they wouldn't get in their environment. We actually were on a dingo trapping week to put collars on them last week. and we caught a quoll in one of our big cage traps with a mullet in it. So we want mullet as well. But yeah, I think they're quite similar. I think they're generalists and they'll eat whatever they can get, but they might have enough separation that they don't compete too much, so they can both exist in slightly different spaces. Maybe it's quolls are taking more arboreal things than the dingoes are, and they can get into different areas than maybe the dingoes can as well, in trees and in the dense heath and stuff like that. Yeah.
Brendan, I think it's done it well, guy. Oh, sorry. But did your dingoes take macropod?
This
So it's the quoll, including cool ground.
Yes. So there's no ruse where we study. Yeah, I think again, because there's such a high density of dingoes. There are swamp wallabies, but they're not seen that often. But we have seen them on the camera traps with taking swamp wallabies as well. I'm sure they go for them when they can. Yeah. Oh, the question was about if they're taking macropods in in the area, if the dingoes are.
My mate.
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Matt,
Brendan, I was just wondering how you dingoes and what influence do there?
So the question was why I chose to study dingoes for my PhD. Really, I did my undergrad at UNSW, and Neil, my supervisor, gave talks in a class that I did, and he seemed like a nice guy. And I thought dingoes were really interesting. So, yeah, I just thought they were really interesting, and he was a good speaker. And people kind of said the most important thing with your honors and your PhD is to have a supervisor you like, and we get on really well. And yeah, I'm interested in a lot of stuff, so the person was the main thing, I guess. Yeah.
You've got with and a sort of background and much about the introduction of dingoes to Australia.
So have we done much much background information on the introduction of dingoes to Australia? No, not really. We haven't done much. There's someone at my uni, Kylie Cairns, who's done a lot of research on their origins and when they came into Australia. But yeah, it's quite debated and not really how we study them, I guess. Like for a lot of people, it's very important where they came from, if they're native, if they're not native, how much domestic dog they have in them, or how much they don't, or whatever. But for us, it's more about the impacts on the environment and what they do when they're there, I guess. But yeah, that was all in Far North Queensland, I think. When that was.
In breeding dingo wild dogs, reckoning purity of the dingo.
The question was about purity of dingoes, and if it's threatening the dingoes. I personally think no. I don't think that. Well, I start with saying in our area they're all 100% pure. So every dingo we've ever caught there, we've got DNA tested, and they're all 100% pure. There's plenty of domestic dogs around in town. They don't seem interested at all to me. They just seem to care about dingoes, really. And I think a lot of the language about dingoes and wild dogs was potentially pushed by the sheep industry a lot more to put them in this wild dog category so they could be more justified in chucking poison baits out, basically, and controlling them, is my view. And I think, yeah, even people who say they're wild dogs, you can't tell them apart, even when they're 25% like domestic dog or 50% domestic dog. They can't tell them apart even when they are. So if they're doing the same thing in the environment, I don't think it really matters how much domestic dog they've got in them. And I think dingoes should be optimized for this environment, right? Like they've evolved to succeed in Australia. So I think the optimal dog form would be them in Australia, if that makes sense, rather than breeding with other dogs.
Adrian.
Where do you go for now on this wonderful research of yours? What's next step?
So the question is what we're doing next. I'm gonna take a break personally. But yeah, my supervisor Neil is gonna keep this project going. So they'll hopefully, he's just got 2 new PhD students, so they're gonna continue working with community and continuing to try to develop more tools to deal with the issues dingoes pose in a non-lethal way. Yeah.
Last one.
So quick comment, maybe just reference to the tourists seeing the dingoes on the dingo thing first. Maybe you could consider calling tourists and seeing the dingoes.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be nice. That would be the easiest solution.
Yeah, well done. Okay, thanks, Brendan.
Thanks very much.
Wonderful speech. And I'd like to call on Matt Allison to give a vote of thanks on behalf of Oatley Flora Forum.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for coming along,
Thanks.
Brendan.
No, thanks for having me.
Giving such a fascinating talk, and apex predators throughout Australia. It's so important that we get research on them to work out our place, their place, our place in this whole country of ours.
Yeah.
So and we're really proud that Oatley Flora Fauna had a little bit to do funding it. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Thanks. Appreciate it. Looks for me.
Yeah.
Wow.
What species have we got here?
2 plants.
This one.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Propagated at Menai?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, friend.
Is that there?
You're welcome to stay or
Yeah,
go.
I have to
as
go
you
because I
please.
got to leave
Yeah.
early. And
It's understandable.
Yeah. But thanks very much.
Yeah. Can we help you?